Welcome everybody to the Unraveler show with the special nights with the Deconversionists. Tonight, everybody, we have some very special guests joining us. We have Tim Mills from Harmonic Atheist. Tim, so glad to have you here. We
Thank
have
you so much.
Yeah, you bet, man. We have Jennifer Fishburne from Answers from Genesis. Jen, great to have you. And unfortunately, our fourth guest, that was Elliot Christofferson, could not be here tonight. His father passed away this weekend. Our condolences are with him and our thoughts as well. And we had somebody else be able to step in, but not a no-namer. Let me tell you something. We are very, very privileged to have Jacob Berman from History Valley joining us. Jacob, thank you for jumping in at the last minute, buddy.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me on.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. Now, we were supposed to be four atheists that used to be four Christians that all thought atheism was nuts. So now we're three former Christians that thought atheism was nuts. And Jacob, somebody who never went to the other side, never became a Christian, and somehow managed to stay an atheist. So that's kind of cool because now we're going to have that fourth perspective here tonight, or second perspective, I guess. That's going to bring a lot to the table. So you're going to get your chance to ask any questions you want. And we're going to have the opportunity to answer those and see your thoughts and hear our thoughts. So this is going to be a great episode. And if you don't have any questions tonight, that's your choice. You may not have anything to say. We're going to answer a lot of questions and objections anyway, because we have been around the block. We talked to a lot of Christians that have had objections. So we've got plenty to say tonight, but I'm hoping that you guys have brought your questions and your comments or objections, because the floor, the chat has the priority tonight. That's the way the show is going to work. So go ahead right out the gate, start typing your questions, start typing your comments. Again, this is all about, what do atheists think? How can you be an atheist? How ridiculous is it? In fact, guys, I'm going to start out right off the bat with one that I get a lot. And I want to give you guys a chance to respond, and whoever wants to jump in can. But it's this basic comment. I've seen it many, many times. Atheists have faith too. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. What are your thoughts to that? Tim, I'll let you start. Go ahead, just so we don't have a bunch of people jumping at once.
Yeah, that's a crazy one. I've heard that many times before as well. I feel like, when we say I don't have enough faith, you're really looking, like, to me, I'm just going back to my days as a Christian. Faith was something that was seen as something that you exercise without evidence. The doubting Thomas figure was portrayed as the bad guy, of course, as the guy that didn't do it God's way. All the other examples throughout the Bible, the idea is that you're going to place your blind faith in Christ and the gospel, and in his general plan for your life and his will for you, without the evidence. And as I obviously went through my deconstruction, I realized that the evidence is quite the other way around. The evidence is against this God being real, and it's very much for him being mythology. I think, too, a lot of them, when they say I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, they're probably giving this idea that they're looking at perhaps something like evolution or the age of the earth or nature in general, and trying to say, I can't imagine that this all came together by accident. I can't imagine that there isn't some kind of mastermind behind it. And I think, again, that's sort of the God of the gaps thing to say. Just because we don't understand it, that doesn't imply that there is a God. It certainly doesn't imply that Yahweh and Jesus are behind it all. It's certainly a beautiful thing to look at the mysteries of nature and say, I have no idea how in the world this all came together. And life is a mystery. Life is beautiful. But to be able to have the humility to say, I just don't know. I have so many questions, and that urgency to say, I have to have an answer. And if the best that people can come up with is it must be a God, and I mean that you'd have to at that point even clarify which God and why is it not many gods. But if you're going to have to plug in an answer right there, then I think a lot of us needed at that point, and people that aren't there yet need to do this, to say, I need to step back from this edge and say, I have this urgency to have solidity and answers in my life, and if I don't have them, I can't take it. And to say, no, life is much more beautiful than you think, even with the mystery. And it's not saying that I've got faith in evolution or chance, or I've got faith and randomness, whatever, or the roll of the dice, but it is saying that there's so much that we just don't know. And you don't need faith to plug in there to say that, this universe is crazy, amazing, beautiful, and quantum physics and all this, like it's just beyond my belief or beyond my understanding, therefore God. That's not, we're not plugging atheism there as our faith in something. We're just saying there's answers that we need to pursue, but the answers are definitely not in the Bible. I'm just giving what's off the top of my head here, but I would say, they're looking at people's epistemology, and they're saying, I want you to epistemologically surrender. Just give me a blank check for all that you pastors say. And it's just, you get to a point where you get sick of yourself for having lain down and surrendered at that and say, I'm not going to just let theology fill in the blank check of my life. Atheism is a position that just says that, there's just no evidence yet for a God. It's insufficient. That's it. That's all we're saying. I don't see the evidence yet. If I see any evidence, I'll certainly look at it. But I think they're straw manning a lot of stuff, but they're also trying to distract you. And I think a lot about illustrations that we all go to, and I'll wrap up with this. Like, you look at the Wizard of Oz. I don't have enough faith that Oz could be this grand whatever character, this grand thing. And it's like, well, no. I'm not saying that there couldn't be an Oz. All I'm saying is I see a little man behind the curtain, and I want to investigate further. And until I see evidence that leads me in a certain conclusion, I'm going to have the humility to say I just don't know. And I'm quite glad to let life be a mystery. But that's where I'd start. But there's a lot more they all could add.
Whoever wants to jump in, go ahead.
Yeah, I will. So a couple of things. I used to have a pastor who used to just say, well, Christianity, God, Jesus, whether you're a Christian or not, all of that is just, it and you nowhere. And he used to always use that, it and you're nowhere. And it's just, that was his version of faith, basically, that you just know, right? And that's when we look at where we were and we look at all the Christians that we now know today, that's pretty much where they are. They don't have any evidence for anything that they believe. They just know it, right? They just know it. And so what they want us to accept is that we just did not have enough faith, even though, the faith of a mustard seed is one of the tiniest seeds in the world. They just think that people who left Christianity, the only reason they could leave Christianity is just because we did not have enough faith. Well, most of us here, not Jacob, but Alan and Tim and I know, were some of the most on fire Christians in the whole world. I mean, we were so freaking dedicated. You couldn't find, it was hard for anybody to find somebody more dedicated than the three of us. Would you guys agree?
Oh, yeah.
So that dedication equaled faith for each one of us. And I would venture to say that we probably had more faith than most Christians do today. So it is an insult, really, to talk to somebody like us and say, you just need more faith, when we probably exercised that faith probably more than just about anybody else out there, I would say. And then last I would say is that what they want us to do is, well, if you don't have faith in Jesus, or you don't have faith in God, or you don't have Christianity as real, whatever the faith is that they're wanting us to have, then you must have, by default, you must have faith in something else. Well, as an atheist, I don't. I don't have faith in evolution. Not sure why that always gets connected. Somehow you must have faith in evolution if you're now an atheist and you've left Christianity. There's no logical train going down that track at all. But I don't have faith in anything. I have abandoned the need for faith, the idea for faith, even the concept of faith, for evidence and facts. And because there is literally zero evidence for God, there's even no evidence for historical Jesus, and there's no evidence that most of the Bible is true in any way whatsoever, then my life now revolves around evidence and facts and logic and critical thinking skills and reasoning and those kinds of things. I don't have room in my life for faith anymore. So that is a religious construct. It's a Christian construct. It's any other religion. It's a construct. And so I think atheists in particular, agnostics no, but atheists in particular have abandoned all of those religious constructs, including faith.
That was great. And Jacob, before you go, I'm just going to say just a quick thought, because I want your thought to be the final one, because you're coming from at least for this question, you're coming from the non-former Christian perspective. So my last thought, just to piggyback on what you both said. Yeah, I love what you were saying, Jen. We don't use faith to determine anything. You don't need faith. Once you have evidence, faith is irrelevant. It doesn't add anything to an evidential perspective. If you need faith, and you're not using evidence. And one of the problems is that leap that says, well, I don't know what it is, and I'm uncomfortable, and I have to believe, I have to know something. So you just leap to, as we call it, the God of the gaps, and you say, and then you land by faith. One of the problems is that robs you of trying to determine what is the actual answer, because you've already concluded something that may or may not be true. It may be true. You just don't know. It's a guess, and that's the problem. So leaping by faith and just saying, I just trust that this is the answer, I'm having faith, that's not useful, because you're avoiding any possibility of knowing the real answer. But the last comment I want to make about this is, before I turn it over to Jacob, is it's such a strange objection to me when I hear Christians say, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Because on the one hand, it sounds like they're criticizing faith by saying, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Like it's such a bad faith. Oh, shame on you, atheists. You have too much faith to be an atheist. Which is weird, because then they turn around and say, oh, the more faith you have, the better it is, right? And I'm like, scratching my head, 'cause I'm like, so which is it then? Are you saying atheists are far more advanced than you are because they have more faith than you, since you don't have enough faith to be an atheist? Or are you criticizing faith and saying faith is ridiculous, thus criticizing your own belief in a God? I'm very confused by that comment, because it's self-destructive. It makes no sense whichever way you take it. Jacob, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. It's strange because they're criticizing faith. Well, wait a minute. I thought that's what your belief is all about. Faith. To accept something without evidence. That's very strange that they redirected against atheists. As it was stated earlier, all atheism is the lack of a belief in a God. Now, because they often hear from people who happen to be atheists that they accept evolution, which contradicts the idea that God created humanity. Now, they'll try to say, because it depends on which Christians you talk to, and they'll say, they'll have different things to say about atheists. They'll address atheists differently. It just depends on which kind of Christian you talk to. But very often they'll say, well, you have faith in evolution. Show me the evidence that something can evolve and turn into something else. Like, you can't show that in somebody's lifetime. They're misunderstanding how long it takes for evolution to work. And they don't care. You can try to explain it to them as many times as you like in so many different ways. They will not care. So it's strange, because atheism, the lack of belief in a God, does not require assuming evolution is true, or all the other stuff that a lot of atheists tend to really know happen, because evolution has so much enormous evidence. It does not require faith to accept evolution. Christians will actually incorporate evolution into their belief system by saying, okay, so I know what to do. I'm just going to say God created Adam and Eve through evolution. That's the ticket. All right, okay, so now evolution fits the book of Genesis, so we're good. No problem there. So they'll try to harmonize science with the Bible, which is interesting. It's a little clever, but it's ridiculous at the same time, because the Bible doesn't describe this stuff. You are reading modern discoveries into the text and say, okay, it all fits. I just find that kind of funny that they do that. But yes, as it's been stated earlier, I was never a Christian. So I do tackle this, I suppose I tackle this a little bit differently, yes. But at the same time, I do largely agree, not just largely, but pretty much entirely agree very often what other atheists tend to say, former Christians who became atheists. I think Christians are trying to move the goalpost here quite often by saying atheists have to have so much faith because they assume that atheism requires assuming all that other stuff that we were talking about earlier in order to be an atheist. No. You can not, somebody can, and I'll end off by saying somebody can be an atheist without believing evolution.
Hey,
That's
right on. That was a great way to round out that conversation.
Can I
Yeah,
can I
go ahead.
jump one more time, Alan? Just sorry to extend the question. I think just important to note too that just the whole question, them asking that, is in some ways a distraction from the fact that we're asking that question. We're saying it to them, and of course that's what they're doing. They're being snarky to us. So we're saying, I don't have enough faith that there's a talking snake and a talking donkey, and that a virgin gave birth to a guy who's going to save us from his father's wrath, and the blood magic works. But I think that's the real crux of this in many ways to me, is that we are looking at a scenario where we are making it obvious that they are believing in something that is absurd, and they're trying to distract from the absurdity. But when you get back down to it, to the bare bones basics, you can't deny it. Christianity is an absurd worldview. It really is. I mean, it's sick and bizarre, and it's based obviously on other earlier mythologies. The whole thing is they're trying to say, hey, look, squirrel. It's like, no, we're going to stay focused. The main point is the main point. Your worldview is absurd, period, and your holy book is absurd.
No, it's a great point. In fact, it almost, it seems like not almost, it is a reaction to the burden of proof lies on the one making the claim. They don't have anything to respond to that. They don't have any proof, so they turn around and say, "Oh yeah, prove God doesn't exist." There, right? And that's, I hear that a lot. That's the whole, and this same question stems from, see, I don't have enough faith in being an atheist because you can't prove that God doesn't. It's exactly right, Tim. Yep. So jumping into the next question, obviously, super chats are going to get the priority above the priority in the chat. And as of right now, I don't know whose channel this is coming from, but we're going to take the super chats anyway.
It's coming from mine. There's two from my channel.
Yeah, I know. So we'll take those first. So we appreciate those coming in. Just FYI, if you haven't subscribed to either my channel, I would love you to do that. That would be awesome. Or Answers from Genesis or Harmonic Atheist. All the links are in the chat below, or in the info below. We would all appreciate more subscribers. It helps us to do more shows like this and give you an opportunity to be a part and follow of what we're doing. I would particularly appreciate it, being a little bit newer on the scene than the rest of these guys. So if you wouldn't mind, just jump on there and subscribe as we talk. That would be awesome. From Constellation Pegasus, give $19.99. Jacob, and everybody else, we'll start with you. I don't think this is so much of a question, but Jacob, if you wish to respond, you can. He says, one of the good things about leaving Watchtower is that we have access to original records, so we can fact check their history of what we can learn about their flip-flops and everything else. It was traumatic, but easy to do. More of a comment, but Jacob, go ahead if you want to say something.
I don't really have much to say. As you know, it's not a question, but yeah, I basically, I agree with the logic of what the super chatter is saying.
Right on. We got a second one from Constellation Pegasus for another $19.99. One thing that throws me for a loss is the words Lilith in the Hebrew Bible. Modern ones use that word. Rashi can tell the difference between an owl or female demon. Christian or Jew can't fully explain it in Isaiah. Again, sounds like a question. I mean, a comment, but if you would like to say anything about that, go right ahead.
Yeah, I don't have much comment on that. I mean, other than to say that there are Sumerian origins for Lilith, but that's all I can say about that.
No, fair enough. Like I said, it was just a comment, but I wanted to give you a chance to respond. From
Yeah.
Eastgate Adoptionist, have any of you considered adoptionism? Jesus was manifested with the Son of God at his baptism. My initial comment's going to be no. We don't even believe Jesus was the Messiah, so why would we consider that? But maybe you guys have better answers than that. Go ahead.
That idea comes from the Gospel of the Hebrews. The Gospel of the Hebrews are discussed by many church fathers. It's a very interesting text, at least to me. It appears to be smaller than the other gospels, at least from what I've seen of it so far, from what I know of it, because I've been looking into it for years. The Gospel of the Hebrews, which is also called the Gospel of the Ebionites, but there are a lot of complex debates about the connections, but I'm not going to get into that here. It's too long of a story. But you have this idea where Jesus becomes the Son of God at the baptism, rather than him being the Son of God from the get-go, from an infancy narrative. So there's no infancy narrative in the Gospel of the Hebrews.
That was the view of Cerinthus, right?
Yes, because Corinthus was using the Hebrew Gospel, and this is discussed in the Gospel of Luke. But Luke is it's kind of funny because, and scholars have noted this before, where Luke has this strange contradiction where, okay, Jesus is the Son of God. He was, born of a virgin, just like he is in Matthew's Gospel. But he seems to become the Son of God again in Luke chapter 3. Okay, so he becomes Son of God at the baptism. That's kind of strange. Why does Luke have that going on? Well, if you follow a scholar like James Edwards, for instance, he is a believer, but I think he makes a lot of good points about the Gospel of the Hebrews. I think Luke was using that text as a source, and I think that explains the contradiction that's going on in Luke. The church fathers seem to be aware that the Gospel of the Hebrews is older as well, and that's a problem that they were wrestling with, a very serious problem. But I'm not going to get into all that right now. In fact, in a later show that we're doing in September, Alan, when I'm going to be talking about the formation of Paul's letters, we're going to be talking a lot more about Corinthus then, so I'll stop there.
I would just add, I don't know anything about the story in particular, but that it was pretty common in those days for the son of a well-known figure, whether it was a king or something, to become a deity later on in life. And that's actually the position that I took even when I was a Christian. Now, I think it's just a story. So is it something that I'm going to adopt today? No, because it's still just a story. But I do think that even within the story that Jesus did not become deity until later on, until when he started his ministry.
So, Tim, have you accepted Jesus as your Messiah?
I did for a long time. I was just gonna. I don't know much to say, but it's just add. I think it's been helpful to me to realize that even within the text that we've looked at as Christians over the years, that there are people that are probably arguing against each other, and even later changes that were occurring. I mean, you see, just as a side example, you see Paul saying things like, a woman should have her hair covered, and then later it says, but she should have her head covered. But then later it says her hair is her covering. He says you should not eat meat sacrificed to idols, and then he says, but there is no such thing as an idol. There's no real false gods. There's only one real God. So, go ahead, have at it. It's like they're arguing within the text, and also, books arguing. Paul's arguing for faith alone. James says faith plus works. And so you realize that they might actually be, it might be less of a which way do we interpret this, and more like we're just looking at texts that had it. I mean, I was looking up some of the verses for this, like Romans 1:4. Paul says Jesus was declared to be the Son of God. That sounds very adoptionist. Mark doesn't begin with the virgin birth; he begins at the baptism. And Acts 13:33 quotes Psalm 2:7, "You are my son; today I have begotten you." So it's like you do hear this sense of its becoming, but I think it's important to note that there might be. It isn't like, I mean, we had this message always in growing up as a Christian. You interpret the Old Testament in light of the New, and then you interpret all the Bible in terms of what is clear first, and then what is fuzzy later. But they were assuming that it's all one unanimous message, and it's not. It's people arguing against each other, even within these texts. And I think that's why they had such a hard time deciding which texts to put in and out of the canon, because they were realizing these things don't jive so well, and we're going to have to really bend over backwards to make these things look like they fit, even though we know they don't. And so to say, is the New Testament adoptionist? It probably is somewhat, and other places it definitely is not. And so but at the end of the day, it's all forms of mythology. So it's ultimately irrelevant. It's interesting only in the sense of It's like saying, is Dionysius adoptionist? Well, in some ways it's interesting, but in other ways, who the hell cares? It doesn't matter for your actual life and your well-being. So I think it's, if the person asking that question is asking it from a purely academic sense, I'd be curious if they mean it that way, or if they're saying, how do we see Jesus? Like, it doesn't matter, and and there were many versions of it back then, so it really doesn't matter.
No, agreed. And if you take the adoptionist view, you also recognize that not only was Jesus adopted, so to speak, and the Spirit entered him at his baptism, but he leaves him at some point, either the death of Christ or the ascension of Christ, depending on the particular view you have. But in no way, shape, or form does Christ remain in his deity forever, because that disappears. It's only for a set period of time. So still, even if you take that view, who are you worshiping? Just another man that was just adopted for a period of time.
I just want to add, it's a contradiction, a very big contradiction that Christians have to deal with, because was Jesus born of a virgin, or was he adopted as a son of God? You can't have it both ways.
Right.
And Paul's letters are a mess. Several internal contradictions, as Tim was noting, as I've been aware of for many years. A lot of people don't think about this. 8 out of the 13 letters attributed to Paul are claimed to have been written by multiple people. 8 out of 13 of them. A lot of people don't understand. These are multi-authored, co-authored texts. It's a co-authored anthology. So this is the way I like to put it. You have different perspectives being forced into the text. 1st and 2nd Thessalonians are written by 3 people, for instance. 1 and 2 Corinthians are written by 2 people. Romans was written by 2 people, with the co-author appearing at the final chapter rather than at the beginning, unlike the other co-authored text. Philemon and Philippians, 2 people. Colossians, same thing. So I'm just giving you several examples. These are multi-authored texts from the get-go. The only letters that claim to be single-authored is Galatians, Ephesians, 1, 2 Timothy, and Titus. All the other letters claim to be multi-authored texts. Something to think about.
Right on. All right. Well, I think we have officially trolled that question to death, and we did a great job. Congratulations, Deconversion. But thank you, Eastgate Adoptionist, for actually asking a question that was really on point tonight and to the topic. That was really awesome. We have a question from Paul Schlachter, and this is a very personal question, I think, and I think it's an important one. He's asking, have you guys found your purpose in life yet? That's a good question for an atheist. Who wants to go first?
I'll be right back real quick, but I'll respond last to this question.
Sounds good.
You want to take this, Jenny, or me too?
So I'll go ahead. So he's assuming that we have something called a purpose in life. And this is something that Christians assume, that Christianity is the only thing that fulfills this imaginary, basically, purpose in life. So where did this come from? Well, it didn't come from the Bible, even, and it's not part of anything. So it's something that I think Christians have almost come up with to say that atheists can't really be living a good life because they don't have a purpose in life like Christians do. And so Christians' purpose in life is, depending on the Christian, there's like 44,000 different denominations. So depending on the Christian, what their purpose in life is, maybe it's to glorify God forever. Maybe it's to worship him. Maybe it's to make him number one in your life. He's more important than your spouse. He's more important than your job. He's more important than your kids. Whatever your purpose in life, maybe your purpose in life is to be a missionary and tell everybody the good news. Maybe your purpose in life is just to get to heaven. Right? So what their purpose in life usually has nothing to do with anything that's of value here in life, actually. Very rarely is that their real intended purpose. And what's odd about this question is that atheists, even though we may not ever call it a purpose, we might not have a personal mission statement or a values statement, or this is my goal for my whole life or anything, but we live our lives, in general, atheists live our lives more to help people here on earth, to help in living this life that we currently live. We don't have our eyes in the clouds, thinking that we're going to go somewhere better someday. And so we focus on, we know that there's only one life and it's right here and it's right now. And so we really, really focus on that. We focus on giving everything to our family and our friends and our neighbors, strangers, people who are hurting. How can we help the world? It depends on where your view is, but this idea that there actually even is a purpose in life, again, is a Christian construct. And this one doesn't even come from the Bible. So that's my 2 cents.
Good thoughts. Do you want me to go next, Alan, or do you want to jump in?
No, go ahead.
I think but I agree 100% with what Jen said. I think it's important to say that when you hear something like what that person said, I'm not assuming that they're actually saying it. They may just be being silly and playing devil's advocate. But for someone that would say it very seriously, and we all have heard that, I think what it's important to step back from is just step back from their question to realize that they're being threatened by us. And a lot of the things I've seen in what we do with our atheist discussions, we are inherently threatening to them. But what they're basically saying is, if you don't believe in my particular version of my beliefs and worldview, if you don't believe in my particularly inherited and forced upon me purpose in life, if you don't believe that way, then your life is basically meaningless and you have no purpose. It's very similar to, if you don't have my morality, then you have no morality. And it's all a form of tribalism in one sense. It's all a form of black and white thinking. But their purpose in life has been dictated to them. It's been shoved down their throat, believe, turn or burn. And we're flipping the script, obviously. We're not pretending that there's some kind of divine narrative. We're not outsourcing ourselves to this divine taskmaster, but we are making meaning. And I think it's been very helpful to me to realize that we are just in the long stream of evolved animals. We are obviously different because we have developed consciousness, and that is unique and amazing, but evolution hasn't stopped with us. It's not going to stop with us. And you wouldn't look at the earlier versions of humanity, and you wouldn't look at the primates that were basically still swinging in the trees and say, what's your purpose? You wouldn't look at a lion today and say, what's your purpose? I mean, their purpose, if you're going to give them one, is just to do liony things. A turtle does turtley things. Humans do humany things. We develop our own identities. We love each other. We help each other out. And there's beautiful things that we can take, whether you want to say you took it from Christianity or this is more just part of you. But, we can say I can love without needing a reward like Christians do. They need to have a reward in heaven. I can love somebody. I can create human connections. I can have a commitment to being, kind and just. I can have awe and wonder looking up at the night sky or whatever. I can take personal responsibility. I can develop myself. But at the end of the day, like Jen's saying, there's nihilism has to come into that equation at some point. There is no transcendent purpose. But because of that, I think other people have said this many different ways, but to the point of saying we have more reason for living than Christians do in a sense, because to them, they feel like this is just like this little stopgap before the real life starts up ahead. When you die, then your real life starts. So it's like you kind of have a purpose, but at the end of the day, as long as you're saved and sealed for the day of redemption, you're going to get to this real big life that's going to start someday. And it'll be amazing. Even if you don't get as many rewards as the next guy, it's still going to be heaven, for goodness sake. It's going to be awesome. And life is always up ahead. And when you realize that's mythology and that they're literally wasting their lives, we have everything to live for. They have everything, in a sense, to die for. They're waiting to die. We're saying, no, I don't want to die. I want to live my life as much as I can. And in many ways, we're living more fulfilled lives, I think. And I think Jen alluded to that. But, especially when you realize your time is short, and it's not short in the sense of short than eternity. It's just short and then it's done. And you also realize you've already lost a lot of your time to mythology. It makes you want to redeem the time. It makes you want to reclaim yourself more than ever. And it also makes you want to leave this planet better than you found it. I mean, when we were Christians, in one sense, we would say that Adam and Eve were given this really amazing injunction to tend the garden of God. And it's like, even as Christians, we would have said, God is someday going to burn this whole thing to smithereens, and it's going to be started all over. But while we're here, make it beautiful, tend the garden. Don't just trash the street, like make it a beautiful place, knowing God's going to destroy it anyway. But now when you take out that second part, knowing that there's no God, and that we're the only people that can do something about making this planet better than we found it, our desire to do that is even greater. Our desire to leave a legacy is even greater. And especially when you're looking at your children, you just think, my purpose is them. My purpose is to give them more beauty and less toxicity than I had. And that, to me, that's a beautiful thing. But Christians, at the end of the day, they're trying to gaslight us by asking the question because they're intimidated by the fact that they want you to buy into their mythology. And they're ultimately trying to set up an equation where they say, if you don't believe like me, then your life is meaningless. And it's again, going to morality. It's like, if you don't believe in this God who committed the genocide, land theft, slavery, child bride stoning, if you don't believe in that, then you have no morality. You're like, I'm sorry, but that's really sick. It's really sick to say it that way. But that's what they do. They do it nonstop.
Right. No, I think that's great. And to piggyback, you mentioned the word nihilism, or whatever. So, so one of the things that is so feared by Christians is without God, there's no purpose in life. There's no meaning. We're just, and sure, that's reality. There's no inherent meaning. There's no universal meaning. There's nothing giving us some purpose in life. We do get to make whatever we want of this life. But it's odd to me now, sitting on this side as an atheist, wondering why I ever wanted some superior being or supreme being to give me some purpose in life. It would be almost the equivalent to being okay with the government dictating what job I'm going to have the rest of my life. We would all balk at that. We would all fight back against that. And yet when it comes to a God, we praise it. Like, oh my goodness, God gave it to me, not the government. But it's the same principle. So why are you seeking that? Why do you want some other thing outside of you to dictate what your purpose is in life? That doesn't seem like a really positive and enjoyable way to live. It sounds like suppression to me. But then to speak on to the term of to the concept of purpose or meaning, just to touch on a small subject, because I know that this often comes up as the problem of evil or whatever. That's a big issue that's contended between Christianity and atheism. But one of the things about evil is, well, if there's no purpose in life, then what's the point of all this evil? She's useless. We might as well just give up and whatever. Well, quite the contrary. If God is in control and all this evil is happening, it's because God wants it to happen and he's in control and he's making it happen. And therefore, no matter what you do to try to stop this evil in this world, you are useless against an almighty God that is dictating what's going to happen in this world. That's the purposeless life. That's a life that even if you try to do something about evil in this world and suffering in this world, your efforts are going to be useless unless God dictates that they're useful, because ultimately this God's doing everything. Whereas, at least as atheists, or as humanists, more importantly in this particular scenario, if there is no God dictating it, and suffering and evil are useless and pointless and have no meaning, that means we actually get to do something about it. We can actually step up and say, hey, there's no God dictating this. This is actually useless and pointless. Why are we letting it happen? Let's make this world a better place. Let's be truly moral, and let's try to bring about the greatest possible benefit and the least possible harm to all people so that we can improve the world that we live in, because there is no God up there dictating this suffering. It's just pointless, and we can stop it if we work together. I think that gives far more purpose and meaning to all of life than some God dictating your job. Jacob?
All I'll say to that is the purpose of life is to find your own purpose.
Yeah.
Do what you feel is right. In other words, do what brings you joy, brings you happiness.
Excellent.
That's the way I'll put it. Nothing really much more than that. Do what pleases you. And make the most out of life. Enjoy it with other people. Participate in a project with other people. Just do whatever you want to do that brings happiness. And don't live in fear. Don't lock yourself into a corner with fear. That's just the way I'll put it.
No, I think that's great. And just to qualify it, I like the way you're saying it, because I am personally a hedonist. I used to be a Christian hedonist, ironically enough. I just dropped the Christ part. No longer am I a Christian hedonist. I'm just now a hedonist. And it works the same, really, as it turns out. Because, and just to clarify what Jake was saying, when I do what makes me the happiest, I'm sorry, but contrary to the accusations, that has nothing to do with hurting people. I am not trying to live happy at the cost of people's happiness. No, I find myself the happiest when I work in conjunction with people's happiness. So if you're the kind of person that's got a messed up head and thinks happiness is brought to you by destroying people's lives, check yourself into an institution, because there's something wrong with your head. It's not working right. So appreciated your thoughts there, Jacob. We have a comment. I forgot. Yeah, Jen, sorry.
Can I just wrap that one up really, really quick? They had asked if the four of us had found our purpose in life. And really, it's quite an ironic question to ask the four of us, because we are sitting here pouring our time and our energy into literally helping people escape what we think is keeping them in a prison. And so for us, for each of the four of us, that is one of our purposes in life. And so the irony of that question, I couldn't let that one pass.
No, you're absolutely right. Glad you said that. We had another super chat for you, Jacob, 1999 again from Constellation Pegasus, and I forgot about this feature. I can pop it on the screen. Sorry, guys.
Right.
One thing that throws me for a loss is the words Lilith in the Hebrew Bible. Modern ones use that word. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. We already got that one. I apologize.
Yeah, we already went through it.
Here's the new one. Sorry.
No problem.
People from the University of Iowa say, and everyone else, there is no break of human activity because of Noah's flood. That is what I call fatal JFK headshot to Judaism and Christianity. Debate is over. Apologists lose. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
We agree.
Yeah, that's all I gotta say is I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Back to some questions. Here we go from.
Can I actually say something real quick about that?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Down. I think it's a great point to say that there are some things that just like they're mic drop moments. If somebody brings up a clear point, it doesn't make sense. You can look at Age of the Earth stuff. It helped a lot of people escape Christianity. All kind of stuff. There's no evidence for a truly global flood. Civilizations around the world did have an unbroken history, since well before when the flood would have occurred. But I think it's important to note, and this has been really helpful to me, it's just the stunningness of the deconversion process. None of it makes sense. It's like we don't need to hyperanalyze Noah's flood, although some of us do. Some of us have had to do that to escape. We don't need to hyperanalyze whether it's possible that the sun stood still for Joshua for a whole day or whoever it was. We don't need to analyze whether the virgin birth really occurred, whether Jesus rose from the dead, and endless other things, whether Balaam's donkey spoke. The whole thing just reeks of mythology. And I think it's one of those things where for a lot of us, we did not have a primer. We did not have a codex that taught us how to interpret this stuff. And when you look at, and I love, some of the work that like Jacob does and Derek and Neil and other people that expose this. But when you get exposed to it enough, the Bible reeks of mythology all over the place. And once you get an awareness of it, it just pops. It just pops. Even if you're not sure, like, I don't know where that one came from, but I can kind of figure out in my head how that probably got to where it was, or just the fact that sounds wrong. One of the biggest parts for me, that helped my deconversion, was astrotheology. And once you see it, once you get enough knowledge to understand where certain references are, in where they're referencing certain constellations, it's like, oh shit, you guys are this is all star stories. And you stop asking yourself, was this based on a historical event? Well, it could have been, but what you get the primer, or the same thing with Dr. Dennis MacDonald, when you start seeing the Greek epics that these are based on. And like, for example, Emmaus, the servant who became aware of Odysseus's, that he was this man because of, he'd been away for so long fighting at Troy. But when he comes back, Emmaus, one of the servants, figures out, even though this is an old man, this is Odysseus, this is him. I have figured you out. I have understood your hidden identity. I know who you really are. And, if we could shave off your beard, we'd see you. You're the same Odysseus that left. Well, then you see in the New Testament that the disciples become aware of Jesus' identity on the road to Emmaus. And then you see things like Plato. He wrote this great book that was like the Bible back then called Timaeus. And then Jesus heals the blind man who's called the son of Timaeus. you start to get all this stuff. And so when you see a new word, like, I wonder what the word Zacchaeus means, little man that climbed up in the tree. I wonder what Zacchaeus comes from. It doesn't really matter if you figure it out. You kind of get clued into, they're playing on words here. They're telling stories and jokes and puns. They're referencing other mythologies. They're telling star stories. And you just, it's important to note the big things like Noah's Ark because of things like, Ken Ham and all that bullshit. But I think it's important to also say the bullshit's written all over it. Not bullshit in the sense that the Bible isn't beautiful. It's an amazing book. You had to be pretty clever to write it. But as a worldview, it's bullshit. As a mythology book, is pretty clever. But I'm saying, you got to get that. I think a lot of Christians, that are on the fence and trying to look at apologists, they're trying to look at specific things and they're trying to figure, is there any way to make this sound rational, logical? It's like, step back from the edge, dude. Seriously, like, look, you got a talking snake, you got blood magic, all this stuff, and none of it relates to your real life. You don't see angels and demons. You don't see this stuff happening. You don't see the sun standing still. None of it relates to the real world. And I think it's, to me, like, I'll just end by saying this, the stunning things to me, the two biggest things that I just was like, oh my fucking God, I am an absolute idiot. I'm the sucker in the room, was circumcision and the Lord's table. Circumcision, cutting off a little boy's genitals. Are you kidding me? And that's not mythology, obviously, but that's just stupid. It's insane. And pretending at the Lord's table to eat a dead man's body and drink a dead man's blood. I mean, that's creepy and that's weird. And it's like, if you can't step back and see the bizarreness of this, I'm sorry, but they got you. They suckered you good. Apologetics is an important topic to go through, but at the end of the day, we should be able to look at the Bible and just be like, this obviously mythology and it's obviously not a good worldview. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Well spoken. Thank you.
Hey, Alan.
Yeah.
Can I address Noah's Ark, since we're on Noah's Ark and that one applies to me in particular? Yep. So my stepdad and my uncle were the biblical archaeologists who discovered Noah's Ark. So this was actually the hardest thing for me to deal with when I was going through deconstruction. And it was the last thing for me to be able to figure out. And just to put that a little bit more in perspective, so the ones who found chariot wheels, the iron chariot wheels in the Red Sea and discovered Mount Sinai. And so my family were very, very prominent biblical archaeologists. So then I had to figure out, okay, so what do I do with that information? Because I know we have all of the original videos, the original photographs, the original, all of the stuff from all of the digs that they have done, all of the work that they have done over these years. I know what we have and I know what's true. And I know a lot of atheists now will say, oh, it's just not true. It didn't really happen. It did happen. It was my family. I know it happened. And so it took me quite a while to be able to reconcile this with what is reality. And so where I came on that, and if you look at, I don't know, Google me or whatever, I was actually arguing for a universal Noah's flood right up until the end of just before I left Christianity. And so this was just the hardest one for me. And I came to realize that most likely what happened was there was a boat. All right. The boat, there was something there on the mountain. All right. So there was a boat. And if someone had found that boat later on, they could have taken measurements of that boat and wrote a story about it. And that's why the measurements of the boat would be exactly what they are in the Bible. And they would measure up exactly to what they found on Mount Ararat, right? And so we know that the Epic of Gilgamesh came before the story of Noah's flood, and that many of the elements of the Epic of Gilgamesh were borrowed for this story in Noah's flood. Speaking of multiple authors, Jacob, I think that there's actually 4 authors for the story of Noah's flood. So that one it's one of the craziest stories in the Bible as far as multiple authors, and you'll find all kinds of inconsistencies if you really, really dig into it. But the second thing is, Alan and I were having a conversation the other day about various myths, origin myths, and we were looking mostly at how Israel borrowed from a whole bunch of creation myths, but within those creation myths, there were other particularly some Sumerian myths that were also flood stories. And they borrowed from those as well. And so there's a bunch of flood stories. The Epic of Gilgamesh is not the only one that they borrowed from. So for me, it came down to, did they really find these things? Yes, my family really found these things. All right, so now what do I do with that? All right, so if somebody had this boat and they wanted to write a story about what happened, about a flood, they could take those measurements and they could put that in the story. That's the only thing that actually makes sense, right? That adds up is the measurements. And then they borrowed from other mythology stories to create the story of Noah's flood. That's what happens throughout the whole Bible. The whole Bible is made up this way. The creation stories are made up by borrowing other stories. The story of Moses is made up by borrowing from other gods and other stories. All the stories that we see in the Bible, all the Jesus stories are made up from borrowing from tons and tons and tons and tons of stories. That's even more than all of the others combined, probably. But that's really what happened. And so I wanted to just explain, because I have a very unique perspective on Noah's flood.
I appreciate that. And I apologize for that thing popping on the screen. I guess my question to the four atheists here is, why did that happen? No idea.
It's a God thing.
Yeah, God did it, especially for an atheist conference. I'll put that up again at the end of the show so you all can see it, but I apologize for that. That was really distracting. I'm sorry, Jen. All right, next question. Let's see where we are here. And by the way, as I'm going through these, if you have questions, pop them in. This is your chance. Krilliman asks, what do you think of the idea of a future witness that's able to look back in time and reconstruct our dead consciousness for beneficial healing purposes? It's an atheistic view of future ability. And just real quick, some of these questions we're going to have to move a little quicker on because we got a lot, and we'll be here till midnight if we answer everyone this detailed. So try to keep them short. Go ahead. Anybody have any thoughts on this?
I've never heard of it. I'm not sure I understand what they're asking.
I don't know either. I was hoping
I don't have any comment.
I think this is a futuristic science fiction idea. I don't think it applies really to.
I agree.
I don't see how it applies.
Moving on. He's good adoptionist. I have no problem saying we are in a physical simulation. Could we be in a test to see who is compatible with an infinite afterlife?
What evidence do you have for your question?
Also a good question and response.
I would just add too, if it's a test, just as much as Christians might say, the test is, will you bow your knee and believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? The test might also be, conversely, there might be a God who's completely different, or gods, and they're testing to see, are you able to see that the Yahweh character is an absolute psychopath? Are you willing, with goodness and beauty in your heart, to reject the awfulness of the Jewish and Christian worldviews? Are you willing to reject those? Maybe they're the ones that get to the real heaven. Maybe if was it Homer or someone else with those cartoons, like, what if there's a different God and we're just pissing off the real God all the time by worshiping Yahweh and Jesus? It could be,
Right on.
You could play a game of choosing the right God. I mean, there's a bunch of religions. How do you know that there's a certain Hindu God that's not the real God? We could go forever on this.
Right on. Mark Shiashira asks a very important question. What's up?
Hey, Mark.
What's up, Mark? Great to have you here with us tonight. All right, here's another one from Tom Kazio. I apologize if I mispronounced that, Tom. Why apologetics if atheists require faith or belief? It's a great question.
I think he missed the first question, maybe.
I think what they're saying, Jen, is if you need to just have faith without having all the answers, then why do apologists try to just give you all the answers? If they're saying you can't be a real Christian unless you have all your answers, and ducks in a row first, that's what apologists are saying, and the Bible's saying no, just believe without the answers.
In other words, if faith is enough, why does God need with apologists?
Yeah. Right. And in
Except
my book,
that there's a verse. There is a verse that says, "Be ready to give an answer at any time for what you believe." Right, and that's in Peter, I think.
Peter 3:15. Yeah. And ironically, so 1 Peter 3:15 is a very fascinating chapter. Somehow, apologists have taken that verse out of its context, really, and they've turned it into a philosophical argument for the existence of God, or a cosmological argument or some whatever argument you're going to use. The real, if you look at the context of 1 Peter 3, it's about the suffering of the saints in the first century. And Peter is actually teaching them that you're going to suffer, and it's going to look like you're suffering needlessly and uselessly. And when somebody comes and they ask you, why are you suffering? You're going to give them a defense. You're going to give them an answer. You're going to speak away, which is the literal meaning of the Greek word for apologia. And you're going to give an answer for the hope that is within you. And then if you keep reading the context, the hope that is within you is that Jesus died for my sins and suffered for me. Therefore, because I have faith, I'm going to do the same thing and follow him because he's going to raise me up on the last day. The entire response that Peter says to give, the defense Peter says to give, is not an apologetic. It's literally to say, I want to be like Jesus because he's going to raise me on the last day. That's it. My hope is because he did it, therefore I'm going to do it. It's essentially faith. That's Peter's argument. It's the same one Paul makes. It's faith alone. Peter's not not arguing for the defense apologists make. Apologetics is a silly attempt to try to provide evidence for something that is entirely supposed to be faith-based. And the reason they do that is because they know full well that a faith-based life, a faith-based belief system is not rooted in scientific evidence, and they want to be a part of that community so bad to be able to say, hey, look at us. We're believing something real. We can prove it. And you can't prove it. If you could prove it, then every time you got to some point in your apologetic argument and we said, oh, wait, how does that prove Yahweh? Well, you just have to have faith. That's not helpful. If you're going to take us only halfway and then say it has to be faith anyway, that's not evidence. Your evidence is doing the same thing scientific evidence is doing. It's pointing to something. It's just saying, yes, there's something else back there that happened. Great. You've really done nothing for your case. All you've done is go as far as science can, except science isn't saying what you're saying. Science doesn't sit around and say, we know that we know that we know that we know that this is the answer. No, science is consistently trying to prove itself wrong. That's what every theory is. Every theory is wrong. That's the whole point. It's consistently trying to prove itself wrong until it can find a better answer each time. Christianity lands on God and says, this is it definitively, with no evidence for it whatsoever, or no definitive evidence, I should say. And when you do that, the problem is you shut yourself down from seeking any actual answer that could be right. Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. It could be God, like I said earlier, just maybe. But that's the problem with just leaping like that. Science doesn't do that. And apologetics is not useful in this endeavor because it actually goes against and is contrary to the whole doctrine of faith alone. Why would you try to provide evidence for something that's entirely supposed to be faith-based? I don't get it.
If I can just add one quick thought. So I think a lot of it is that they're trying to bring some kind of sensibility to something, again, that's very absurd. I mean, I think a lot about there's an apologist I've seen come through many times. His name is Jonathan McClatchy. He has a website called Talk About Doubts. And I see him often advertising, hey, please come, one of our 30 Christians that are dedicated to answering your questions will, jump into a chat or get on a phone call with you. And they're trying to bring some semblance of, we are not believing the absurd. It's like, and they're trying to, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. We're going to talk about the amazing complexity of biology or this or that. And they're going to ignore a lot of science. They're going to only bring up the science they want. But when you come down to it, again, you have to get down to the absurdity of the claims of the Bible. They're not going to start with, we believe in a God of genocide, land theft, slavery, child bride, stoning, genital mutilation, blood magic, all this stuff. They're going to start with this academic stuff. They're going to try to make it respectable. And in many ways, I in some ways almost like it when Christians talk, because they dig the hole deeper. They make our job easier. They sound more absurd the more they talk. But the hard part about that is that there are, a lot of Christians that are on the fence that are thinking about things. They're very susceptible. They're very weak, and there can be suckered, especially when they've got a lot of pressure from loved ones to stay in the fold. But the more that they do this, the more they look like they're just trying to defend the absurd. And it's one of the, I love doing like a post-mortem, or like people say I'm a people watcher. I love when you hear people say that about themselves, because it makes you think, maybe I should be a people watcher too, and just what can we learn about human nature? Often when I'm thinking about a specific topic, I think through it, and then I try to step back later and say, what does this teach us about human tendencies? Humans tend to believe absurd things, and then they tend to try to justify it. And especially if you have peer pressure to do it. And that's one of the weirdest things. But I mean, this isn't just about epistemology and about theology. It isn't just about mythology. This is about human nature. Like, we need to admit there's some whacked stuff in the way that we see ourselves and the world, and our unwillingness to be rational. We are far less rational creatures than we admit. And so many of us are, and I'm not saying that as if atheists get it all. You can deconstruct and deconvert from Christianity and still be a very irrational person. And I think we all have to have the humility to say, I'm probably still irrational. I was irrational as a Christian. I'm now an atheist, but I probably got some things that I'm not seeing right. And to admit, I mean, that's one of the things that Christians cannot be humble enough to admit it. Admit it. You tend to believe in the absurd and defend it at all costs, even though you don't have to, just because of the peer pressure and the sunk cost fallacy stuff. But come on, you've got one life. Make it count and get some truth in your life. But they're not willing to do it. And it says a lot about human nature. It really does. It's fascinating to me.
Right. No, a great point. And I think Jen touched on a lot of this earlier, and especially when we were talking about faith, my opening question at the beginning of the show. But it doesn't make any sense. And I hear this all the time. One of the criticisms I know we'll get, even after this conversation, I can already see it. It doesn't matter how much we say. Well, you guys are being ridiculous. Faith doesn't have to be without evidence. There's absolutely evidence for the existence of God, and it's just part of faith, and it makes it stronger. Look, you're misunderstanding the whole concept of faith. If you have faith, you don't need evidence, and if you have evidence, you don't need faith. Like, that's what Jen was saying earlier. Evidence isn't based on faith. We're not living by faith when we see evidence. Evidence is just something you acknowledge, you recognize as true or not. It's that simple. It's not a thing you have to take on faith. And I hear this argument a lot. Oh yeah, you have faith that if you sit in that chair, it'll hold you up. That's not faith. That's based on evidence. That's based on untestable evidence of past experiences of this particular chair, and also chairs in general. I just know they hold you up. Is there a possibility one will fail me? Yes. That's why it's not faith. I'm not just taking it on. I know that I know that I know that I know, right? It's testable, provable variables that tell me that this chair will hold me up. So to say that faith and evidence work in conjunction is a complete falsehood. You cannot say that. They do not work together. They are like oil and water. They are complete contradictions. Jacob, do you want to make any last comments on this before I move on to the next question?
Nope.
All right. Next question. Do you even exist? Jacob, go first.
I'm just going to quote that famous saying, I think, therefore I am. That's all I got to say to that.
Okay. Anybody else? Nope.
Great answer.
I think it's a great answer. I would just say, I think you all have alluded to in other answers, I don't think we have enough evidence to know. And, for all we know, again, this whole universe might be a drop in somebody's watering can. We don't know. We just don't know. And I think that I love thinking about the possibility that we're in a simulation, but again, I don't think any of the evidence is there for it. I do think that from where I'm standing, we're evolved animals. Live your life as much as you can doing the human things that you do. And if there's more to it, if there is a God who wanted to demand more of us, it could have been a lot clearer about what the expectations were. It's the fact that it's silent and unclear says a lot. If it's out there somewhere with demands that we're not meeting,
Right. Arn Anka, thank you for the question. I would just say in response to that also, I think hard solipsism is genuinely an impossible thing to know. We just, there's no answer to it. We can't know 100% certainly that with 100% certainty that we are not some, brains in a vat. We don't know. But what we can do is, if we're going to have any conversation whatsoever that takes place in the reality that we know, we have to just put that out of the equation and say it's silly to even discuss that, because if it turns out that's the answer and that we are brains in a vat, then none of it matters anyway, but we can't possibly know. So let's leave that out of the equation. We're talking like human beings. We're talking like this is our reality. This is how we have to live based on what we actually do know, not what we don't know. So do we even exist? Well, as far as we can tell from the reality that we're all living in, yes, this would be a logical deduction from the way that we exist and talk and have our being. And I think, therefore I am. Great answers. Another one from Art Enka. Can it not just be that some are more locked into fantasy-based thinking? I mean, yes. Does anybody want to elaborate, or is it just a yes or no question?
I would just say it's brainwashing. Though it's not just fantasy-based thinking. I think that doesn't just naturally occur. I think that's a part of brainwashing.
While some people might be more susceptible to something like that going on, I think for the context of our conversation, some people, or a lot of people, they want hope, and they don't feel that hope in the natural world, so they want to go outside of the bounds of nature to find it. And that's why they're going to have a hard time letting go of their religious beliefs.
All right, very good. I am scrolling, and I'm not seeing any questions from the floor currently. So let me ask you guys another question that we hear commonly. Well, that's more of a personal question. Let's see here. Oh, here's one. Do you realize you're risking eternity in hell?
My response is, which hell are we going to?
All right.
Jen, you want to take this
So
one?
that I just assumes that there is a hell. I mean, these kind of questions, and many of the Christian questions are this way. And we've talked about several of them today, that Christians assume something begins, like there's a purpose in life, or there's a hell, or there's a heaven, or there's a Jesus, or the Christians assume so many things to begin with, and then they ask the question around their assumptions, and they want to put us in their box. And we used to live in that box, at least the three of us, right? So when you study hell, it becomes, that's one of the easiest things to let go of. For many, many Christians who go through the deconstruction process, hell is one of the first things to go. And there are even a good number of Christians today, especially those in the grace movement, who just don't even believe that hell exists, and they still stay Christians. So I think that one is just another one of those, this is your belief, and you're trying to put me into your belief. I studied this topic. All of us have studied this topic enough to know that I'm 100% certain there is no hell. It does not exist. So no, I don't have any concerns about that in the least. It's not my construct. It's your construct.
Right.
I would just add it's clearly mythology as well. I mean, when you look at the history of the origins of hell, you look at the influence of Zoroastrianism on ancient Judaism. You look at how this evolved. You look at some of the afterlife stories of ancient Egypt. All that stuff. You can see it. You can see the stories evolving, and you can see that it didn't start out as a place of punishment. It started out as just a place of like dead people walking around in caves underground, and and Hades and so forth. I'm sorry, and what's the word I'm looking for? Sheol. And then eventually it gets turned into these these Greek mythologies where you're looking at Hades and Tartarus. You can clearly see they're changing the story, and Zoroastrianism had a lot to do with it, with the whole idea of we're gonna the fire is gonna come, right. It's gonna burn everything, and the only thing that's left, it's gonna stand, is gonna live forever. But you also, I think it's again important to go back to human nature with this. We're the kind of people that have historically done incredibly horrific things. I would argue we're doing horrific things to each other even this very day. We as humans tend to torture other humans, and we have to admit that we're pretty nasty as a species. And the fact that we are willing to instill this not just on other people but on children especially, it says it just continues. Human nature is very, very, very not just tribalistic, but it's downright torturous. We're willing to torture other people in real life and in the mythological life to come. That says a lot about us. And I think it's a good example for me to say, look, if you believe monstrous thoughts long enough, it does turn you into a monster. And this is an invitation to say, do you want to be a better person, a better human? Do you want humanity to evolve from this? Do you want it to stay stuck in this? The longer we believe in that kind of mental torture And especially when we define that kind of psychological abuse as love, like God loves you so much, he'll beat the shit out of you forever. Like if that's what your definition of love is, hyper abuse and psychopathic nature stuff, then you're just going to continue to twist the narrative of what we could be as a species. Human kindness has been held back exponentially by Christianity and Judaism. We are better than this, but we're not going to get better at this until the mythology dies, because we are giving ourselves the freedom to torture each other in the name of God and say this is a good thing. And it's, as long as we keep doing this, we're never going to change.
Jacob.
I was just going to say real quick, Sheol is just death. That's all it is. There is no hell in Judaism, and that should be a wake-up call to anyone that believes in the hell in Christianity, because it also the same thing for Islam, even though Islam claims the Bible's corrupted. But how does God's apparent chosen people not get informed about hell? Seriously, that's ridiculous. Oh, he just left that out. We'll save that for the update in Christianity. We'll save that for later. We'll just leave that out for now. That's just ridiculous.
Right.
Ridiculous.
Makes sense. We got a couple more super chats, and I promise you we're going to get to them. I am scrolling through. We will not leave you without being heard. I promise. Got one right here in the queue though, and I'll keep scrolling down. I'm sorry for delaying it. Homemaker Calling asks, do y'all feel like you gained way more empathy towards people when you left Christianity?
Way more. I mean, there's no reason to judge people anymore because it was religion that made me judge people. There's no reason to shame people and blame people and condemn people. And so if I don't have this religious book holding me to religious standards and telling me how to look at other people, and I remove all of that negativity from my life, then how do I look at people? Well, I love them. How can I help them? How can I be friends with them? Can I get along with them? How can I be kind to them? It was night and day difference for me in how I related to people when I left Christianity. And I thought that I was a non-judgmental Christian. I thought that I treated people well as a Christian. I really thought I did. But when I left all of that religious baggage behind, then I was free to, okay, well, I want to give people the freedom that I want to give other people the same freedom that I want them to give me. Therefore, I don't have any reason to judge them. I don't have any reason to look down on them. I don't have any, I'm not sending them to hell. I'm not praying the imprecatory psalms against them. I don't think that they're wicked because they, love this person or they have sex this way, or, I don't think all of these things anymore. And it just totally changed the way that I see other people. Other people are they're another version of me. They're not, there's no reason for me to look at them any different than I look at myself. So yeah, it really, 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 I significantly noticed that I loved people a lot more. And
I'm just going to piggyback on that to your point, Jen. When you follow the Christian love that the Bible teaches, not only do you not get that freedom that you're talking about and that empathy that you're discussing, but it's quite the contrary. It's submit or else. It's a demand that you have to do what this God says or you're going to die forever. That's not empathy. That's in slavery. That's what it is. And so that's essentially what the gospel call is: become a slave to Jesus or be punished forever. I mean, that's the message. It really is. And then what do you become? A bond servant of Jesus Christ. You become a slave for eternity. That's not an empathetic life at all. There's no way that I can be empathetic towards somebody if my call as a missionary of God is to go around telling people submit or else. It's nuts.
Yeah, I would add to maybe the sense that I think we do develop more empathy because in some ways, again, this tells us about human nature, but also it gives us the sense of what other humans are going through. When you look at the fact that humans are basically in this whole thing. We're heavily indoctrinated, which is a trauma. We have attachment wounds between our own parents and our Heavenly Father. We have these fight or flight or freeze, whatever responses to God and the Holy Spirit, and sin and the fear of hell and the fear of judgment from the community. We have shame-based conditioning across the board. You should be ashamed of yourself. You're wicked. You're born in sin. Nothing you do is good. We've disassociated for our whole lives. We've been codependent our whole lives. We have the need for so much like inner child work. It's off the charts. And then you do some of that work as you deconvert, and you get trauma informed, and you see the wounds beneath the behavior, beneath the surface, and you see why people are saying certain things, why they're afraid, why they act and react a certain way. And you see the fragility of our lives and of our beliefs and of our worldviews and of our emotions and the psychology behind it. You become so much more sensitive, and you say to yourself, like, I am empathetic to myself. I'm empathetic to myself as a child. I'm empathetic to the fact that I'm not responding necessarily right even today. I am wounded. I may be trying to help other people, but I'm a wounded healer, as it were. We're so broken as people from this religious stuff and from indoctrination. And when you see that, you see yourself through that lens and other people, and you get very trauma informed, I think it breaks you open. It breaks open your willingness to say, like, oh my gosh, what have we done to ourselves? Could we have not done so much better than to beat the shit out of kids when they're little with a paddle, or to tell them you're going to burn in hell if you don't believe like I do? Could we not have been better people? And to break the cycles of abuse. And yeah, when you see it in yourself, your own life, your own heart, and then you look out at the world, you just think, my empathy and my love and my desire to heal the wounds, it grows exponentially. I mean, it can't not do that. You feel so bad, especially for the people that are either still stuck in it and will be probably stuck in it for their whole lives. You have that distant empathy, like I wish you could escape, but I know you're not gonna. But also the people that are going through it where they're being hurt. I just interviewed a JW. It'll be published in a few days, but I interviewed a lady where she deconverted from Jehovah's Witnesses 8 years ago. Her mother hasn't spoken to her in 8 years. I mean, that's some painful shit. And she's going through it. You can't help but think, oh my gosh, I just want to wrap you all up in my arms and give you a big hug. This is really sad. We're so much better than this, but we're so stuck at the same time.
It is. And, I just want to clarify, because again, I can already see the responses. Alan, that's, ridiculous. Tim, that's ridiculous. Jen, you guys are being ridiculous. That's not true Christianity. That's not the gospel message. Burn or else, suffer or else, just go to hell or else. That's this horrible form of Christianity. The true, and I'm dealing with this even now as I discuss with people, just things with my book or whatever. That's not real. The true Christianity is just Jesus just came and died to give everybody a chance to be like him, to be a loving person, and so by faith in him, you get that opportunity to do it. And don't listen. My reason for saying this: if you're a Christian listening to this, don't be deceived into thinking that somehow twisting the message to make it sound more positive means that it doesn't make you any less of an infidel that's worthless. Because the question comes down to, even if you take that view of it, why then do you even need to have faith in this Jesus to be a good person? The reason is because unless you do that, you're not good enough without him. Like, get it through your head. In any way, shape, or form, if you need some Jesus to do anything for you to make your life better, it's because you're not good enough on your own. And that is a real problem. And it may be couched in these positive terms of love and wonder and just be like Jesus. You're missing something that's undergirding that whole thing. And it's the reason that's driving you to this Jesus to begin with. It's because you feel a sense of worthlessness, a sense that you're not good enough without him. That message in itself is a message of worthlessness. So don't buy the deception. You're still being fed that lie. You are good enough. You don't need Jesus to do that. We here don't need Jesus to do that, the four of us, and we're being good people of society. We're trying to pour into humanity and make the best things we can, do the best things we can to improve. You've heard us say it tonight. So don't buy that lie that you need Jesus for anything, because you don't. Jacob, you want to comment on this and then we'll move on?
Well, this question doesn't really apply to me since I was never a Christian. What I will say is I recognized early on that when I was encountering Christians, the idea of how controlling it can feel when they ram the idea down people's throats of hell to try to get people to convert out of fear. That's what this is. It's trying to convert people out of fear. And it makes you want to ask, it should make anyone ask the question, if they require fear to convert people, then is it real faith? Or are you just believing just simply out of fear because you're afraid? How is that love from God? That would be my question to people that stay in the faith out of fear.
Yeah, great, thank you. Eastgate Adoptionist.
I'm sorry, could I go back to that 1 second?
Yeah.
One quick thing I want to say, here to what Jacob said, preach it, brother. That was right on time. This is all about the carrot and the stick. What's your reward, and how much do you want to avoid the punishment I'm going to give you if you don't? But just 2 quick things. For Homemaker Calling, I don't know if you all have reached out to me under a different handle, but if you all would like to share your story sometime, if you've deconverted, please reach out to me on my Facebook handle is simply Harmonic Tim. And also, I'm just going to, I love when someone says Homemaker Calling. Honestly, it makes me think of a certain group of people that used to be my home base. And if you were a homemaker into essential oils and quiverful and all that stuff, and now you've woken up, I would love to interview you all. There was something else I was going to say, and it escapes my mind, but I will come back to it when I think of it. Thanks, Alan.
No worries. Yeah, Homemaker Calling, she'd be a great one. I'm supposed to be interviewing her myself sometime here in the near future. So she is a mother of, I think, 3, if I remember correctly, and busy, of course, as you can imagine. So anyway, we always appreciate when she asks questions on the show. Eastgate Adoptionist, another super chat for Jacob. We have these great functions that man figured out that are possible in a system that is already here. If this reality or simulation is from randomness, why do we have this math layer? One of you smart 3 to answer this one. I don't have a clue.
My brief answer to this question is, let's pretend that's true for a minute. Does that determine which God was behind it? How do you know that God is the same as any of the gods that's ever been discussed in any mythology? It could be something totally different from all of that. So even assuming that this is what you think it is, how does that tell you who was behind it?
Right.
That's all I have to say.
No, and you're absolutely right. In questions like this, usually I don't even know what to say to, because you're absolutely right. There's just like, you're not proving anything. You're making declarations that take you. No, it's the whole. At the end of the day, when I say to you, how does this prove Yahweh? You're going to say, well, you just have to have faith. This is not useful at all. Jen, did you want to say something? I think I saw you piping in.
I will say again, here is, and whether this is a Christian construct or not, the word randomness. So this is a word that is often applied to both atheists and people who believe in evolution. And I don't take the position of randomness. I do believe in evolution at this point, but not in randomness. So I think that everything started out very simple with just, well, we're not going to go all the way to the beginning, but let's just start with the elements. And we just started out with one element, and we added another element and added another element, if we're talking about the table of elements. And they went through the process of evolution, and they adapted to their environment. And through that process of adaptation, then things became more and more and more complex. And along with all of that was I believe, the survival of the fittest. So whether that is in people or whether that is way back in, were there other elements that did not survive? Were there other microbes that did not survive? Were there other bacteria that did not survive? Were there viruses that, all these little things? Were there other atoms that did not survive? Molecules, all that kind of stuff? Yes, there were. And so it was not randomness, but it was a pattern. So life is built on patterns. The universe is built on patterns. Our minds are built on patterns. Our body is built on patterns. Everything is built on these patterns, and these patterns are not random, but they're also not created, and they were not designed. So they came about from the simplest amoeba, right? And then they got a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. It's kind of like if you were drawing a picture and you started out with just a stick figure, and then you filled in a little bit, and then you filled in a little bit more, and then you're like, I think this doesn't really fit in the picture. Let me erase that. And at the end of the picture, it's very, very complex and beautiful picture. And that's kind of where we're at right now, is this, we live in a very complex and beautiful world, but it didn't just randomly get here. There's a scientific reason why everything happened from the beginning billions of years ago to where we are today. And if we did experiments, or if we did just looking at the evidence and looking at the facts that we have, we can actually tell you why things evolved the way that they evolved, from simple to complex. And that's just the way that science works. So taking the word randomness is, again, your construct, and one that I just don't have to live under.
Tim, you wanted to add something to this?
I don't know, honestly. This is beyond my pay grade. I'm not sure if I understand the question, to be honest. But if they're just asking, why does math dominate the universe? Is that kind of where we're going with this? I mean, I think it's an amazing thing, but to me, it brings humility, and it brings a lot of sense of, we've got a lot to learn. I love seeing the new telescopes and what they're bringing out. But I think if we could look 1,000 years or 2,000 years in the future, we would look back at people like us and say, we were like in the Stone Ages. We had no idea at all what we were talking about with science. There's so much to understand. And I've spent literally years of my life, story for another day, but I've spent years of my life thinking about and studying the Fibonacci sequence and the way that it works. And if that's the kind of stuff they're alluding to, it's amazing, amazing stuff. I mean, whether you're talking about the stars or Fibonacci sequence, or you're talking about just something as beautiful as the birth of a baby, the universe has some pretty cool stuff that will take your breath away, but that doesn't mean it's the Bible or Yahweh that's the answer.
Right.
If I could also I remembered what I was going to say before, and I just want to say it before I forget it. You've said a couple times the phrase, I know there's going to be some objections to this. I think it's a great reminder that, of course, there are going to be objections, but I want to remind people who are in the deconversion process, who are a little bit more in the sensitive zone, where, you do read these stories of people that create a YouTube channel and they talk about some topic, and then they get some negative comments where people tear them apart, tear them to shreds, and they get depressed, or they have to get off social media, or they, horror of horrors, they commit suicide or something. It's like, it takes your breath away the way some people respond to negative feedback. I want to remind people, if you are thinking of creating a platform at all, develop a thick skin beforehand, but also learn to ignore people. I honestly have learned to ignore almost every voice that comes at me. You get just a laser focus on what you want to do with your life. Block out everything else. Let the naysayers say their nays. If they don't matter, learn quickly whose voices you let into your filter, and keep that filter really tight. Don't let people knock you down, and also don't get suckered by the questions. They're masters at smoke and mirrors. But especially, please, if you are deconverting, please develop a thick skin as quick as possible. They will tear you to shreds, and it will ruin your life if you let it. If you're careful and you do it the right way, it won't be a blip on the radar. So just my 2 cents on that.
No, that's great advice. Glad you said that. And just Eastgate Adoptionist, my real quick 2 cents, because everybody's already said everything, because I don't often respond to you, because usually you ask questions like this and I'm just like, dude, they're not helpful. But I will say, Matt, laws of nature, like math, are not things that we create. They're things we discover. We create the systems to help us understand them better, and the terms and the definitions, but they're things we discover. Once we discover that, that's as far as we go. We say, okay, now we know this. We don't get the right to just say, because now we know this, there must be a creator that made it. How do you know that? You don't. All you can go, the furthest back you can go is to say, hey, we've discovered a law. And that's it. And until you have some system in place to determine whether or not there's something beyond that, the best answer is just, I don't know. You don't get to just use this idea of randomness that you've created and say, this looks random because, something had to create it. No, something didn't have to create it. It's just a law of nature. So be aware of that. There's no need to be adding something to it that isn't there. Constellation, Pegasus, another 499 says, another thing, if the devil and hell exists, why didn't God tell the Jews about it?
Yeah, that's the point I made earlier. Yep. Why didn't you tell them about it? Why do you wait?
Right on. Here's a fun one for us. Douglas Thornstone. God has been taking me to hell all throughout my life to watch people being judged and thrown into the lake of fire. And a few times I made God angry, and he threw me into the fire. You are all wrong 100%. There.
Is that
Enjoy your fantasy?
Is that real, or is that just being?
I have no idea.
sarcastic?
It seems pretty. It's got to be a joke, right? It's just hard
Yeah, it
to-
sounds sarcastic. It might be a reference to him going through hell sometimes in life. He might be using it as an expression.
I hope so.
But I don't know. I can't tell for sure.
There are people who live in these fantasies, though, and if you are one of those, Douglas, then enjoy your fantasy. But I don't have to live in your fantasy.
Right.
Somebody else in the chat asked him if he's for real.
Can I
don't see a response. Go ahead.
Can I just say one thing too? Just Douglas, in case you are real, and in case you're really saying that we are all wrong and that hell is real, I just want to encourage you to think of a couple things. Number one, would you really want to worship a God like that? I mean, I have said to my own children things like, if a daddy were to drown his kids in a bathtub or a pool, would he be a good daddy or a bad daddy? They're smart enough at like age 2 or 3 to say you'd be a bad daddy. If I were to heat up the cast iron pan and put some oil in it and then stick your hand in it for just 1 second, let alone forever, good daddy or bad daddy? Oh, horrible daddy. So you go to prison for that. Would you, if that God were real, would you really want to worship him, or would you want to say, I will never bow down, even if you literally have the power to torture me? That will not turn into worship. You can give me all eternity. You're just an absolute psychopath. Would you want that God, or would you not do anything you could if it were possible to fight him? But also, you're talking there about, you've made God angry. He's thrown you into the fire. If you're doing that poetically and picturesquely to try to say you've been through hell in life, it takes a lot of guts to realize that life is life happens, and sometimes we all get taken through the ringer. We lose a lot of things. We have love lives that we think are going to last forever, and they don't. People die, people get sick, and our jobs, we lose our jobs. There's all kinds of things that ruin our lives. And if we spend our lives looking up at heaven and shaking our fists and saying, God, why did you do this to me? I didn't deserve it. Or maybe I did. Maybe I didn't have enough faith, or maybe I didn't do the right thing here, and I've got this sin that you're punishing me for. You can, that's a hamster wheel of psychology that will ruin your life. I encourage you, please step back from it. If you're not being snarky here, you really do believe this stuff, there is a whole beautiful different perspective. And when you step back from it and you say, this stuff just isn't relevant, it's all mythology, you'll realize that you have a lot more power and control over your life, you're more autonomy than ever. And also, when life just happens and it goes against you, you don't sitting there thinking, I can't believe it, this is just not fair. There's no fairness. There is no ultimate judge that's going to restore the years the locusts have eaten. But it takes away the weirdness that Christianity's put in your head with this filter of when good and bad things happen to you. I really encourage you. There's a beautiful life on the other side of healing from that perspective.
And even if you believe that God really did take you to hell, how did you get out? It's supposed to be forever. Want to explain that part to me?
Good point.
All right. Paul Schlachter, hopefully I pronounced that right. Hypothetical question. If you were God, how would you communicate with humanity, and what would be the most important message?
I think the way that we communicate with one another is probably the best form of communication that we have, because that is how humans communicate. So we communicate by having a conversation. We don't communicate by sending one letter and then disappearing for millions of years. That's not how we communicate. So having a conversation, probably with visuals, because half the humans are very visual, which is why we're doing this video, right? Half are audio, so they want to hear it. And most people want a combination of both. As far as the most important message, I don't think that there's anything wrong with the number one greatest commandment, to love one another. But if that's all you have to say, and you wrote it down in a book somewhere 2,000 years ago, and you have nothing else to say since then, is that really love?
And did we really?
If a parent did that, if a father did that, we would say, no, that's not love. He says, kids, love one another. Bye. Not going to have anything to do with you ever again. That wouldn't be love.
Right. And did we really need that message? I mean, did you really accomplish much by sending that? I mean, it's like, in fact, it almost seems like without writing the Bible, as Tim was mentioning earlier, I think we'd have done a lot better off without having this book influencing how we're supposed to live. So in a lot of ways, putting it in paper, pen and paper, was probably the worst way to communicate with generations that were going to come forever, especially since language changes. And so my thought is, if I was God, the first thing I would realize is, language is going to change over time. People are going to have different understandings and nuances of these words. Maybe I shouldn't just put it down in one letter and send it the rest of my existence. Maybe I should appear every generation and help them understand each time what I'm trying to communicate. But to say further, if I was God, I imagine I would know what each human needs in order for me to reveal myself to them and for them to believe in me. And I would do that rather than letting them guess and take it on faith. I would probably just say, ta-da, here I am. Like, that makes more sense to me rather than trusting the manipulation of human beings to pass it on to one another and trick each other into believing in this thing with no evidence. That, if I were God, that'd be what I would do. I would just stop with the whole faith thing, and I would just say, here I am. And look, the people who say, and I've heard this argument, well, God can't do that because, if he did that, then it's not free will, and people would just have to believe in him, right? Really? Because I'm pretty sure there's this whole belief system in Christianity that an archangel named Lucifer fell from heaven by ignoring and disobeying this God who he knew existed without faith. And he still found a way to use his free will to rebel and turn against him. So that argument does not make any sense. Obviously, you can still reject God even if he appears to you and you know who he is. So my thought is, just appear, yo, and then let us decide whether we like you or not. That makes more sense to me.
I love it. I would just add, or piggyback, I think you're right, that idea of God speaking in a book and in dead languages. I mean, you could also argue, like, if he's going to do it in languages that change at all, like, why did you do what you did at the Tower of Babel? Why did you mess us up linguistically in the first place? But I know that's mythology too. But I would say if I were God, I would communicate in a way that's meaningful and purposeful. And I think the biggest messages we need to hear are, you are loved and it's going to be okay. And I mean, if I can quote that verse, was it 1 Corinthians 2:9? No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no, the heart of man has not imagined what great things God has prepared for those who love him. Just to say, it's going to be okay. I'm going to take you to a beautiful place, whatever it's going to, I've got you. Humans are desperate for hope. I mean, that's what this whole thing is. We are people that are willing to line up and do anything we can to sell our souls for hope that tomorrow is going to be okay. And you're loved and you're okay. And obviously, a lot of other good things, like how to have good relationships and how to have a good planet. But I think the thing that to me is always stands out to me with deconversion is the idea of the father figure. And I know it's going to be different for different people. That may evoke different concepts, especially if your father was abusive. My physical father was very abusive on many levels, but I still saw the Heavenly Father as still a separate, ironically, and a good thing. And I loved him. I loved my father. And I wanted to go to heaven to see his face. And I still wish in some ways that I could go to heaven. It's still one of the hardest parts of this for me is that I don't go anywhere when I die. But, we all need a safe home. I mean, I think a lot of this too is like, we're grown up children. All of us are here. We've got gray hair. Maybe not Jacob as much. Jacob looks good, but the rest of us probably have too many gray hairs. And, but we may be older in our bodies, but we're children inside. We're all children begging for our mommies and daddies to love us and to tell us it's going to be okay. And then when the thunder and lightning strikes, it's the monsters aren't going to get us. We're all kids cowering in the dark inside. And we want hope and safety. And if there were a God, I would hope that would be priority number one, that he would be truly a heavenly parent that would instill safety and love in his kids.
All right. Here's one that's not so much a question, but I just want to pop it up because it's a concern that I have, and I hear this kind of thing a lot. But before I pop it up, just keep in mind, everybody, we are nearing the end of our show here. So if you have that big question, that big objection that somehow utterly destroys atheism, throw it up there because we're going to try to get to that before we end the show. That's what we're here for, is to help you understand how can us idiots be atheists, right? I mean, so we're hoping that you can kind of get your head around some of this stuff today and realize that, there's actually some sense to this, and nonsense to Christianity. So, or theism in general. So throw them up there. I'll try to get to them as quickly as I can, but here's one that concerns me. God is just another name for life as an organized total. You can say that a lot of different ways. God is just another name for energy. God is just another name for...
Sounds like pantheism.
Or it's pantheism also is another version of this, I suppose, where God is in everything, right? Jacob, you want to comment on it?
No, I just did.
Okay, that's it. So my concern with using God as a interchangeable term for anything else in nature that actually has its own term that we can use to communicate is that you're blurring lines now, and you are bringing in a term that convolutes the conversation. It's not helpful at all. I don't know why ex-Christians in particular have such a need to hold on to this term God and apply it to other things in life. It's like we're talking about energy, and it's like, well, yeah, God's energy. No, God's not energy. God is what you used to believe. That's God. God is this supreme, omnipotent being out there that controls all things and determines all things. If you want to subject God to this term called energy, I don't understand what the point of that is. If you need to bring him down to that term anyway, then why even use it? Just use energy, because that's what it is. So I just really struggle with this need to hold on to God as a term. And I know those who have not been Christians their whole lives like we have, they don't see the harm in it, because and I've heard people tell me this, well, that's just a trigger word for you because that's a belief system you had and you're just triggered by the term God. And I get where they're coming from, because for some reason for them, it's almost like a spiritual experience. I just like the term God. And these ideas of spiritual experience has also become an issue. Spiritual is now redefined. Spiritual is anything that I have this experience with nature, and they call it spiritual. And we come from a place where God and spiritual, these are terms that define something in the supernatural, and they have meaning. And I know that the typical statement is, well, it's only because you guys are triggered by it as Christians. Maybe it is that partially, but also we now live in the real world and in reality, and we want to be able to communicate in terms that make sense. And that when I say something to you and you say something to me, we don't have to define the terms every time we're talking. Can you just use the term that science has given it so that we can actually have a conversation and not be like, well, what do you mean by God? Like, what's the point of that? What do you mean by spiritual? Like, what's the point of that? These are just like woo-woo terms that aren't advancing the conversation. Maybe you guys can help clarify if I'm not making sense, but it's just such a strange thing to me.
I thought you made sense.
I've made sense of this by saying that in the Bible, the ancient writers did not understand a lot of what we understand about science today, which we all know, right? And so what they did was their version of the God of the gaps. So if they didn't understand, a God is omnipotent, all powerful. God is omnipresent, present everywhere, and God is omniscient. These are things that we find in the Bible attributed to God. But this was really, God was a placeholder word for, I don't understand. That's what it was. So if we say energy is all powerful, energy is all knowing, energy is everywhere, then we understand, okay, well, they just didn't understand what was going on. And so they had a placeholder word. And they weren't the only ones. All of the ancient Near East basically used their own gods as their placeholders for attributes and for stories and all of these kind of things. So to me, this was just, they didn't know what to put there. They didn't have a word for energy. They had a concept for energy. They didn't have a concept for consciousness. They didn't have these concepts. And so they just put their word for God, which is actually not the English version and the Hebrew version, the words don't even match up as far as their words for God and stuff. But they put a word there that was a placeholder because they didn't have a word. They didn't have an understanding. They didn't have a concept of it. And so one of the things why I react so violently when people still use the word God and it doesn't actually mean God is because, number one, words mean things. And so to your point, Alan, we have to be talking about the same subject, the same thing when we use a certain word. So if you use the word God and I use the word God, we better be on the same topic. We better be talking about the same God. Otherwise, we're going to talk right past one another. We're not going to make any sense, right? And we're not going to know who's saying what. But the word God in today's American world, today's world, I should say, not just American, but the word God has a connotation of a religious being that comes from the Bible, if you're talking about Christianity's God or Islam's God or, whatever religion you're talking about. But we are talking about a deity that comes from a story. And so that's why you and I, Alan, react to that, I think, so violently, is because we know that person does not exist, that being does not exist. I am 100% convinced, not 99, 100% convinced that the Yahweh figure in the Bible does not exist. Why? Because we know, the four of us here know, that is a compilation of stories, gods that were borrowed from other nations around them. And so therefore, we know that it was just made up, 100%, right? So when we use that term too loosely, it loses its meaning and we cannot have a conversation. We're just talking past one another. And again, it's appealing to a religious construct. And so anything that's appealing to a religious construct, you've heard me say this 10 times already, is not something that I have to be a part of. So I do not have to participate in your version of God unless we need to have a standard for what does that mean. That means it's the term that you give to the person who's in charge of the Bible or whatever religion you're talking about.
Great. Did somebody want to say something? I heard a mic go on.
I was just going to say, I don't know if I understand the question completely, but I took it differently at first. And then when I heard you all speaking, I thought, oh, okay, that's probably the right way to interpret it. But my first thought when I saw that question was whether or not they were looking at it. Like I've heard some people talk about Jesus' character and the Gospels and even Christianity as a whole as really about people going through different levels of higher consciousness. And I think I'm probably misunderstanding their statement. It's probably not about that, but just in case they're talking about that, is this, the sort of the kingdom of God is within you kind of stuff? Maybe the pantheism that Jacob mentioned, whatever it is, you are God, or this is all Jesus is, the Gospels are all about, not about him and him saving you, but about you saving yourself. if that's at all what they're alluding to, I would just say that is a fascinating interpretation. I don't know enough about it to know, how to make the Gospels quite squeeze into that. But I do think it's important to admit, like you guys were saying, that we need to have clarity on the words, but also like if someone is seeing their Christianity through this lens of spirituality, I would just say that I feel like there's a lot of me that when I see people deconstruct, I want them to. I naturally, like we all do, we want them to see things the way we do. But I think that if someone's saying, I need some kind of spirituality, even if it's woo woo, whatever, I need crystals, I need new age, I need to be a witch for a while, whatever. If you need something to feel like you're connected, if the idea of pure materialism and narcissism, like someone like me would adhere to, if that freaks you out and feels very uncomfortable and like just makes you feel like fingernails on a chalkboard, like there's got to be more. There just has to be more. We don't have to land. There's no like fundamentalism. You better land like me. Like land where you need to land and be flexible to land somewhere different tomorrow. Just in case they're interpreting that way. Spirituality is on the table. For a lot of people, it's just going to be as simple as just connecting with nature more than ever, looking up at the stars at night with new eyes. But it's a beautiful life. Pursue whatever you need to be healthy and pursue the beauty.
Right on. I'm going to keep going because we are definitely coming to an end here. We may have to do another show of just Q&A because this has been fascinating. We got a ton to go through. I'm going to try and speed through these. So I'm going to throw some up here. Like, we really have to nail 10 seconds. Like, just throw your answer out. This one's just a fun question. So it's Homemaker calling again. Thank you, Lily. If you had 1 hour with Yahweh, we know he's not real. What would you ask him? We're going to change this. If you had 10 seconds with Yahweh, what would you ask him? Go.
What the hell's wrong with you?
That's good. I think I just changed my question. I like that. I'm going with that.
Why do you hate people so much that you murder them?
Right?
My question would be, what's your deal, dude?
Yep. I think that's it. There's so much problem in the Bible. I think Ken summed it up. It was perfect. I'm going to scroll down here. I know we have another super chat happening somewhere down here. I saw it. Now I can't find it. Where'd it go? It was from.
Just click on stared.
Oh, starred. Thank you. And it's this bottom one here. Okay, thank you, Jacob. It's weird you say I can't, and for $5, thank you, Eastgate. It's weird you say I can't end atheism without declaring Christianity. Face it, you have to be an agnostic. I don't know what
that question is just bewildering me right now. That doesn't make any sense.
Man, I don't know what that means.
End atheism. I do not get it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think if I could read through the lines, I think what they're saying is, I don't know why you are deconstructing Christianity and landing in atheism. If you don't know, then you should just admit you're an agnostic. Is that possible that that's what they're getting at?
Let's pretend it is.
Because I think we would agree. We would agree. We're atheists, but we're also agnostics. If we see evidence otherwise, we'll go with it. Yeah, we're all ultimately agnostics.
Well, except Jen. I don't think you are, right, Jen?
I'm not. Nope. That's why I repeatedly say I am 100% atheist.
So we may have to have a show where we all debate what atheism is and agnosticism is, because
I agree with Jen.
I would say I'm 100% atheist in the same camp you are, but I would still say agnostic as well. But that's okay. Tonight's
the pure fact that we can't know everything 100% and never will, the fact that we know 0.00001%, that to me implies agnosticism has to be on the table. Has to be.
Right.
And the fact that all the stories we know were made up and borrowed and borrowed and borrowed and borrowed and borrowed tells me that they're all made up.
So really,
we don't understand the nature of reality, though. We don't know what we're living in. There could be a million.
Well, that's
billion
a simulation.
Let me go back to
question.
What I said earlier, real quick. Sorry I interrupted. But I just wanted to say that even if there is a God, right? How does anybody know it's the same as any of the gods in all of mythology in our history? It could be none of them. That's the way I'll put it.
And
or it could be an advanced alien race that's had 1 billion years of technology ahead of us. We wouldn't know the difference between a god and a 1 billion-year further advanced species, you know?
Then we come back to our definition of God.
Right.
Right. So at the end of the day, I mean, there's different versions of atheism. There's agnostic atheist, and then there's a Gnostic atheist, which Jen would be. And by Gnostic, it's not the same. When you combine it with atheist, it's not the same as Gnosticism. It's just I know God doesn't exist, which would be Jen's.
Right.
Mine and Tim's, and possibly Jacob's, if I'm understanding correctly, is we don't believe there is a reason to believe in God. So it's just a flip of a statement. Jen's more assertive. I know there isn't. Where we're saying we don't believe there is. So we can't know and we don't believe. Whereas you would say I can know and I do. So that would be the different version of our forms of atheism here. Just to keep that simple. All right, I am seeing not much here, but let's see what I got here. Steve M. If the devil is God's enemy, why would hell be a torturous place? Surely the devil would be more likely to offer paradise than damnation to stick it to God. That's fun. I like it. Not even something we have to answer to. Hypatia Stanhope, is people believing in biblical stories as literal a modern thing?
Well, that's
Kind of.
that's been going on, though. Been going on.
Well, it depends on what you mean by modern again, right? So modern is very subjective. But the Jews historically did not believe that the Old Testament were literal history of their people, you know, and in fact, many of them still don't. So they believed that it was mythology for a very long time. I don't know when it crossed over into, you know, the literal. It's more American than the rest of the world as far as believing this literal history type of a thing. But modern is a word that's subjective. It has not always, people did not always believe it was a literal story, if that's what she's asking, or he.
You look in the Gospels, Jesus clearly believed in Adam and Eve. He talked about, you know, when he's answering questions about marriage and divorce, he says this is the way God designed it with Adam and Eve in the garden. He's and there's other references to, but he by the time of Jesus, or the Jesus character's development, they clearly believed in literal stuff. So I think, and I mean the fact that they believed in literal angels, I mean the Dead Sea Scroll community.
Tim, right, that's a story that's explaining a story.
Right. I'm just saying, if we were to take it at face value, that if Jesus had been really existing, and if you really said that, then with that assumption, then it sounds like Jesus believed in Adam and Eve.
Or he was just explaining a story.
Yeah, could be. But it's at face value, it sounds like he's saying this is the way God designed it with these two people. So he put people together, therefore don't divorce. It sounds like he's making a reference to something that actually people should believe happened. But we'll save that one for another time too, if you want to.
We may have to have a show where we all debate shit. But I'm gonna, because there's still, it goes on, and I can't even scroll to the bottom to see whether there's questions or whatever. We have to end at some point. We do need to end. So
I'm good till midnight.
You're good till midnight. Yes, this has actually been a lot of fun. I think we need to have this group back together again, because this was just way too fun, and I'm sure there's plenty of questions. We have a great crowd of people joining us tonight. It's been a lot of fun. I have one more that I saw as I was going through, and I was like, this is a good show ender, because I think this question really does hit home for a lot of Christians wondering what in the world atheists are doing. And I see this a lot, maybe phrased a little different, but for the most part, here we go. We're going to end on this question, and then we'll end with a little bit of a promotion on a thing coming up. From X Music, Atheism Maturity Growth Steps. You ready, guys? We got some advice here on how to grow as atheists. Number 1, awakening and leaving religion. Number 2, try to show others the hypocrisy and fallacies of religion. Number 3, stop talking about religion and live your lives.
Well, what I'd like to say real quick is, what I noticed about a lot of other atheists who did leave a religion, they sometimes keep the baggage with them to a degree, some of the fundamentalist thinking, and they'll apply it to different subjects in life. While I'm going to avoid getting into the exact examples of what I'm talking about, I think some people can guess what I mean. They'll still shun other people over different beliefs. I think that's ridiculous. And like, well, if you're going to behave like that, you might as well have kept Christianity. It is strange how I've noticed this going on lately, where atheists will shun even other atheists for not thinking in exactly the same way. And all they're doing is helping apologists attack atheism by saying, "Oh, haha, y'all are breaking up in different denominations, but y'all claim to be coming after us and try to say that our stuff is BS." So all that division atheism does is only make it look like that they're right, even though they're not right. They'll take advantage of it anyway. So I think atheists need to learn to get along with each other a bit more lately. That's all I have to say.
Here. I'll drink to that.
I'll drink to that too.
I was just reminded of a analogy, Plato's cave. It's another way to put it. Get up and leave the cave. Go tell other people they can leave the cave too, and then go live a beautiful life. I think that's the way to say it. I would agree with that in a very generic sense.
Right on. So that step 3, maybe this is not what was intended by this, but I do hear this a lot. So if this isn't what you meant, exit music, then disregard it. But what I hear a lot from Christians is, I don't understand why you guys are spending so much time talking about God. Why don't you just go live your lives and stop trying to destroy other people's lives? Stop trying to get in their business. Stop trying to help Christians leave the God they love just to destroy them, right? Go live your lives. You guys have probably heard that. And that's what I wanted to respond to with this question, even though perhaps I misunderstood the point of it. But what you're not understanding is that we also, just like we used to have a heart for people when we were Christians, because we thought that what we were believing was true and that people's lives were at stake and that they were wasting them living for the world and they were going to go to hell and that we wanted to save them. Now we also recognize that there is harm in the religion we once were in, and it's damaging people, it's damaging society. We see it infecting politics in so many negative ways. We see power struggles going on because of Christianity, because of religious-based thinking. And also just the fact that it's a mind virus, that you yourself think you're talking to somebody and that you have an invisible friend that doesn't exist. So these are concerns of ours, and we want to help you see that so that you can still live whatever remaining life you have here on earth free and in reality, because this is the only life you have. And if you're living it for some dictator, you're not living it for yourself. And so we do have a concern. We are trying to genuinely save you, if you will, from not eternal hell anymore, but from the falsehood that you're believing in. Not because we don't have better things we could do with our lives, but because we genuinely have experienced both sides. Well, except Jacob, but he was close enough. He got to learn about it enough and almost got in, but he saved himself early. But we know what it feels like. And we're on this side and we're saying, holy crap, I feel a responsibility to humanity to say, hey, we can do better than this. As Tim was saying earlier, we don't want to leave you in that trap, in that mind virus. So we have our own mission now. The difference, though, is I'm not being told by some dictator, go and tell them submit or else. I don't need that. I'm doing this of my own volition. Tim's not making me. Jen's not making me. Jacob's not making me. I'm doing this because I care. I genuinely have escaped something that was awful, and I have seen what it does to people. And that is why I do what I do, because I care about you and I care about people around me, because I want to make this world a better place. That's what we were talking about earlier. You don't need a God to do that. God is not dictating this to us. We are humanists because we genuinely want the world to be better. So I don't know if anybody wants to add to that.
I always go back to the Matrix. Once you've escaped the Matrix, it's a beautiful thing to help other people escape it too. And also, since we're ending, my final word, no one said the word sex yet tonight, so my last word is sex.
How funny, because you're right. That's typically the big thing. Oh, you atheists, all you do is want to have sex. You sinners, right? That's hilarious. Not even a single mention tonight. Jen or Jacob, any final words? That's so funny, dude.
I have
No, I think you nailed it, Alan. I mean, that's really, we keep talking about it because we genuinely care. We genuinely love other people, and we genuinely want to see them have the same escape from the prison they don't even know they're in that we have experienced. And that's why we do it, because we love people.
Right on. Jacob, any last words?
No.
All right. I just want to let everybody know BajaCon is coming up in case you are interested. This is an annual conference that happens for atheists and, well, humanists, agnostics, skeptics, you name it. But those who are no longer Christians, those who just want to go and have fellowship, that thing, that community that you miss so much from being a Christian. Here's your opportunity. If you want to be a part of this, here's the information. I will also pop it into the information as well after the show, because I don't think it's in there currently, but I will pop it in there at 8:00 tonight. It will actually be on my Facebook page as well. So if you just look up Alan Bondar, go to my Facebook page, it'll be posted tonight at 8 in case you don't see it in the info. So go ahead and take a look at that. Would appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe to any of our channels. Tim at Harmonic Atheist, go over there, subscribe. He does some wonderful work over there. Interviewing people on a regular basis. I mean, it's just mind-blowing to me to see how many people are escaping Christianity. It's wild. Jacob from History Valley, he does some marvelous work over there, talking about all kinds of really deep stuff, dealing with scholars and having great shows with people that come in and can talk about, the mythicism and all that kind of stuff that we were discussing tonight. Jen Fishburne, of course, is with Answers from Genesis. And she's got some great stuff over there, too, some personal things that she's discussed, especially her testimonies of leaving Christianity. One of the greatest shows she does is the one that I'm on. So obviously that's an important one to watch. But anyway, so go check that out. The show we're going through my book, How to Kill God the Easy Way. So I encourage you to not only grab the copy of the book, because it's in the info as well, but check out that show because we go through it chapter by chapter, and we're having a lot of fun doing that. So be a part of our communities. Please subscribe. We'd love that. And we thank you so much for being a part of this night. Tim, Jen, Jacob, thank you guys for being here. And from all of us, y'all have a great night and enjoy the rest of your evening.